Very good.
Yeah, started. And then if you want to, and then the next one.
I never tried it on myself, but I have so you can try it. And they find out they want to do. No, well, I know, right, too. Many times a day. I do. I just want to.
Each one you go, click on it, and it opens it. Okay. All right, so this is the first one.
Yeah, now how do I go to the next one?
Let's go to the file.
How do you go to the file? Just hit it. With a certain-
Okay. What time of the year? Times. And just twice a year.
All right. Veterans Day, look, we probably.
Yeah, very good.
That's why we're. Good morning. So once again, apologies for the delay. Again, our office administrative people work here during the week. They don't work on the weekend. So I'm still looking for people to step up to bridge that gap. Otherwise, expect these delays every time. That's not my expertise. And we're doing our best here. So any people who want to like volunteer to coordinate with Sapir, that they know, what if I'm not here one day? What if I have to teach the children? I'm looking at them, I'm just trying to tell people, you know, we're a community. We're not just clients, we're partners. So there's an adult ed committee, for example. There's people here. If you a little bit technologically inclined, and you could just, for example, right now, Sapir already put this somewhere in the system, but we're not able to find it. Right, so I'm asking that it's not just me who knows how to do this, kind of like fine tuning. And of course, I'll talk to her to figure it out. All right, so I don't want to take more of your time, and to say that, well, Tuesday is Veterans Day. And we're blessed in Temple Sinai that we can sometimes bring people from the greater community to speak to us, but we're also blessed with a lot of people, many people from our own who are very knowledgeable and have amazing experience, knowledge, etc. So Gary Ginsburg, I first met you on the hikes,
Right.
on the hiking around
Not Hope Cemetery.
Right, and then I realized that you are every day or two, you go to the White House, etc., right?
Well, not every day, but once in a while.
So I'm going by the US veterans, so we're very happy that you're here with us today, and we're looking forward to this wonderful presentation. Yeah, you gotta speak to the mic. Right here. Yeah.
It's not working.
Is this working?
Now,
I guess I gotta turn it.
It's working.
Okay, so y'all can hear me. Okay, good morning. Again, Gary Ginsburg. I'm originally from Syracuse, New York. I've been a member here of Temple Sinai about 7-8 years. I did serve honorably in the United States Army for 33 years. And So I'm gonna talk a little bit about what I was doing. More recently, I was getting active with the Jewish War Veterans of the United States, not the largest, but the oldest veterans organization. And there's at least one other member here with me in the room. This microphone, okay. And, okay, we switched mics. I know there's a few veterans in the room. I'll talk a little bit about what I was doing with the Jewish War Veterans, and then also a little bit about my perspective on the Jewish American veteran experience. And given the audience here at Temple Sinai and our relationship with Israel, I've also got some things here about IDF, and actually that's even in the first slide. And so anyhow, there's two major endorsing entities for Jewish chaplains, rabbis, and there's actually two cantors on active duty. The Jewish Welfare Board that you may have heard of, they've been around 100 years, based in New York City. They do a lot of the endorsements for Reform, Conservative, and some Orthodox rabbis. And of course, there's multiple flavors of Orthodox Judaism. There's modern Orthodox, Hasidic. I'm not big on labels, but it's good to understand what's happening. I got a chance to speak at the Olive Institute. That's this picture right here. This is about a year and a half ago. And I'm trying to think. Yeah, this is in South Florida. They're part of the Hasidic or Lubavitch out of Eastern Boulevard or Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn. So these are very Orthodox and traditional rabbis that support the military. Now, if you go to the far right, the three individuals, those are two U.S. Army chaplains, rabbis, and a chaplain assistant. The gentleman right to my right shoulder, the guy in the white shirt and the dark tie, that's actually a rabbi in the German army. The gentleman in the light blue shirt is a rabbi in the Belgian army. And the gentleman in the dark blue shirt or uniform, that's a rabbi in the Netherlands Navy. And the two gentlemen on the far left are from the IDF, one Army and one Air Force. There was a Canadian rabbi that was there, although somehow he didn't get in this picture. This was, I think, at the end of lunch on Friday, about a year and a half ago. Some of you are familiar with North Miami Beach. It's a very heavily Jewish neighborhood. This is kind of adjacent in a place called Surfside, Florida. So to go to the next slide, let's see, how does this go? I might need color.
They're not exactly slides, they're just photos.
Oh, photos, right there.
So
Okay, go to the next,
so we have to get out of one photo and
then go to the next one. Okay,
just like this.
I might,
You go one by one and you click.
all right, I might need you, okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, I might need you to help me. I'm still learning technology and, okay. I think I've shared with a few of you, I've been around here a little bit on Friday nights for Shabbat. Sometimes I've not been here. And when I wasn't here, I was actually doing some things. The veterans community is generally getting older like the rest of the country. And when I came into the Jewish War Veterans, I kept hearing about, we gotta get younger, we gotta get some younger people. And it turns out there are younger Jewish veterans around. And somebody took me in 2017 to a baccalaureate ceremony at West Point, at the Jewish Chapel at West Point, U.S. Military Academy. And it's about 40, 50 miles north of New York City. There's a lot of history at West Point, and there's a lot of Jewish history. And I got delayed because of the pandemic, but starting right after the pandemic, when we got back into West Point, I started going there on some Fridays, when maybe I wasn't here, 4 or 5, well, 5 or 6 hour drive, so maybe once a month, whatever. And I started to go down there Friday afternoon, Friday night for Shabbat. And I started to get to know some of these young men and women, very bright individuals from across the country. And I began, it wasn't 5-minute speed dating, okay? But actually what I did is I got to know some of these individuals, spoke with them, listened to what they were doing, told them what I was doing in the Army. And I started to sign some of them up, signed a bunch of them up. So these two individuals right here are the Brodsky, I shouldn't say girls, they're young women, the Brodsky sisters, they're twin sisters, Jewish girls from northern New Jersey. This picture was taken a couple of years ago when they were freshmen, 17 or 18, just out of high school. They're gonna graduate in May. And so that's part of the future Army. And like I say, Jewish young men and women are part of this. I'm told that they're twin sisters. I forgot which one is a few minutes older, but, that's the situation with that. Now to advance it,
So escape,
oh, escape,
and then you
okay,
just go to the next one.
okay. I'll probably learn it by the time we're done. Okay, you talk about young men and women, in the military, and my background is Army, so I'm a little bit, some of these pictures initially are Army, but we'll get to the other services in a few minutes. When people graduate West Point, they're typically commissioned as second lieutenant, and they have a 5-year active duty service obligation. Of course, sometimes there's exceptions. This young lady right here, this was Friday afternoon. Sometimes I show up a little bit early. Some of the cadets are trickling into the Jewish chapel a little bit early, depending on their schedule. And this young lady right here, her name is Sophie Cohn from Chicago. I got to know her for a couple of years. And this picture was taken in January of 24, so almost 2 years ago. And she knows me, I know her. And when I saw her, she seemed to have an unusually large smile. And I'm certain it was more than just because I showed up. Okay, I don't think it was because of that. And I'm thinking, you know, what's going on here? Something's going on. She's a student, a cadet at West Point. She's probably not pregnant. She's probably not getting married next week. So I asked her, I knew her well enough, and I said, Sophie, something going on here? You seem extremely upbeat. She had just gotten a letter a week before that she'd been accepted into medical school. And so what happens in her case, she graduated in May of 24. And instead of going off into the Army someplace, the Army's paying for her 4 years of medical school. Which is actually a pretty good deal. She'll graduate and be accelerated to captain. Now, the other side of the story, you know, there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? So her 5-year service application is being extended. I think she told me she's got to stay 10 or 12 years, but she seems to like the Army. And when you think about the world today, for somebody to earn a baccalaureate degree and then an MD, a medical degree with 0 student debt, it's pretty good deal. So that's Sophie Cohn from Chicago. I think she's going to medical school someplace out in the Midwest. She's from Chicago. But, okay, so we're gonna hit escape. Escape,
Then you go to the next,
go to the next one.
double click with a, there you go.
Wait, what happened?
No, this, which one do you want? This one?
Yeah, that one.
So you hit here.
I'll hit that one. Okay. Okay.
So give them, teach them how to fish. So
Let's
that's,
go, let's go to the next one.
oops. Well. That's all I know how to do. Why did, so these one. This one
Okay,
worked,
that one worked.
that one worked.
That one worked with Sophie Cohen. And
That one doesn't wanna work.
See the arrows on the side?
what's that?
You try that, go back to the one that worked.
Okay.
And then,
Now, yeah, what if we just hit that, if we hit the arrow, I think that. Wait a minute.
That one's too loud. Image is broken. Yeah.
Okay, we'll go to this one. Okay. Well, that's good. Let's go back.
No, I'm just checking.
Oh, yeah, those are, okay, all right. I might need help to advance the slides. By the time I figure out the technology, it will be done. But anyhow, once a year, there's something called Jewish Warrior Weekend. It's an unofficial program, which means the military services give the Jewish cadets and midshipmen from the service academies, they give them time off, 3 or 4 days. The funding for the travel is private philanthropy. So this actually is a picture of, this is actually Friday the 13th last year. And it's the Jewish Warrior Weekend at West Point. Sitting right next to me, some of you might have seen that gentleman. He's on television on one of the networks as a military security national affairs commentator. That's Jack Jacobs, the guy in the gold tie or yellow tie. He's the only living Jewish Medal of Honor recipient. I was one of the guest speakers in the morning, and they had Jack in the afternoon. Jack Jacobs is a Vietnam veteran where he earned the Medal of Honor. He's from Brooklyn, a lot of people from Brooklyn, and he lives now in New Jersey. The gentleman with the big smile and the white shirt, the white shirt, he was a professor or an instructor for 3 years, a guest instructor at the Naval Academy. He's in the IDF Navy. And his name is Noam. He's also smiling, probably not because I was there. I think his wife, they just gave birth to their first child a week or two before, so he was feeling pretty good. The guy at the head of the table is a Jewish graduate of West Point. He's the president of their chapel fund, Terry Bresnick. And then the guy next to him is one of the Jewish professors at West Point. So let's see if we
Go to
can,
that arrow,
wait,
we just discovered the arrow, right?
okay, the arrow right here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay, wow. Okay.
Getting better, guys.
Yeah, like I said, I'll have this mastered by the time we're done. This is the Jewish Warrior Weekend. I think it was a year later. This is at the US Naval Academy. Now, what's interesting about this picture, you see the 3 people on the right. There's a young lady, she's Olivia from New York City. The light blue shirt, that gentleman is Ben from Los Angeles. He's in the Air Force. The lady in the middle, she's Jewish midshipman from, I think, Las Vegas. She's smiling. I don't know if she had a big hit at the casino, but anyhow. So you have Army, Air Force, and Navy on the right. Now you see the 2 people on the left, different uniforms. Anybody want to guess what that might be? What's that?
IDF.
That's correct. Those are 2 IDF, I can't say soldiers, maybe sailors, they're IDF Navy. And they were doing 1 semester at the Naval Academy, and then they're future ensigns in the IDF Navy. There's a great deal of mil-to-mil contact, military-to-military contact, more so than many people realize, between Israel and the United States. And like I say, that professor in the prior slide was an example, and these 2 individuals as well. And they're doing quite well. I think they just did 1 semester, then went back to Israel. So let's see, we're gonna hit, is it this button here?
Right.
Oh, there we go. Wow.
Backwards.
Wait a minute. Okay, there we go. Okay, wow. The Jewish war veterans were established, before I comment on this slide, just a little background. The Jewish war veterans of the United States were established 15 March 1896. There's a famous person born on 15 March, some of you might know. She's also from Brooklyn. She passed away a few years ago. It's a coincidence. She was born in the early 1930s, but it's also the birthday, 15 March, of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Okay, that's just totally a coincidence. We were established, unlike the other veterans organizations, we were established initially as a voice against hatred and anti-Semitism. In the 1890s, people were claiming, and this is before social media, before CNN, before television, before a lot of things. People were claiming that Jews did not serve in the military. Jewish people have served in the military from the very beginning, and in fact, 4 or 5 Jewish individuals are in the Medal of Honor in the Civil War. So there's always Jewish people in the military of the United States. Since World War II, though, in recent decades, they tend to be scattered in small groups. West Point being an exception, there's increasing numbers at the service academies, which is an interesting subject. The Jewish people are about 2%, 2.2% of the United States population. The graduating class coming up in May of 26, I think it's going to be over 3% of the Jewish cadets, young men and women. As you can see, some of the pictures include both men and women. Over 3% will be Jewish. That's what we know about. I say that because when people come into the military, they're not required to identify they're Christian, Muslim, or Jewish. Some people put down that they're Jewish on their records, like I did. 25–30% maybe put down no preference. So the people that we know about, that's what we know about. This picture right here, this is kind of fascinating for somebody that thinks that, well, Jews don't serve in the military. They do serve. This is a group of Army, Navy, Air Force cadets, midshipmen. There's also some Jewish midshipmen from the Coast Guard Academy, and 2 of the 3 Jewish midshipmen from the Merchant Marine Academy. A lot of people don't know the Merchant Marine Academy is out in Nassau County. And half of them go into the Navy, some of them go into commercial shipping, but there's some cadre, there's, I think at least one of the parents was there. And as I say, this was on Friday the 13th of September last year. The Jewish Chapel at West Point's been around for 40 years.
They're all Jewish?
What's that?
Those are all Jewish?
These are all Jewish young men and women. That's correct. That is correct. There's some Jewish graduates, alumni of West Point. There's 2 of the 3 rabbis. The Navy rabbi you'll see later, but the Army and Air Force rabbi are in those pictures. In fact, that's the Air Force rabbi, that's the Army rabbi. They have their first Jewish chaplain at West Point, Rabbi Borshoff. Jeff Jacobs, he's not the same as Jack Jacobs. Jack Jacobs is a Medal of Honor recipient from Vietnam. Jeff Jacobs, no relation. I guess it's a common Jewish name, I don't know. But Jeff Jacobs is a West Point Jewish graduate. He's a retired Army Major General. He's the chair of the West Point Jewish Chapel Fund. And so, yeah, those are all Jewish personnel. There's some Jewish professors in that picture, both military and civilian. And there's also, I think, 3 or 4 ROTC elements from, I believe, Tufts, Norwich, Harvard or Yale, I can't remember which one, but yeah, they're all Jewish young men. Some of them have graduated, so they are currently lieutenants or ensigns in the United States military. And let's see. Oh, wow, I'm actually figuring this out. It's halfway dangerous here. Me and technology.
The other button, the whole thing explodes if you.
Oh, okay. All right, well, keep that in mind. This is an interesting picture. We had a change in the administration, as you know. Let's see, 20 January. Everything changed in Washington. We have a new administration. And let's see, Monday, I think it was, yeah, Monday was 5 May. Myself and Ken Greenberg. Ken's the gentleman in the wheelchair, the scooter there on the left. He's our full-time staff person, our senior staffer at the Jewish War Veterans in Washington. Ken and I met with the current VA secretary, and that's Doug Collins. He's the guy in the red tie. To his left, the guy in the blue tie, that's the deputy secretary of the VA, Paul Lawrence. The lady next to me, Jen Birch, is the deputy chief of staff, and the other guy there is Sean Lee, an Army veteran. He's they call it the VSO, the Veteran Service Organization Liaison. Okay, so what were we doing in the VA Secretary's office on Monday, 5 May? Couple of things. We had some general issues of veterans advocacy, and then we also talked to him about some issues that came up that surfaced or exploded in the VA. There was some anti-Semitism that came up in the VA right after 7 October 2 years ago. The prior administration had developed a training and education package in an effort to counter and mitigate anti-Semitism. And that was about to be launched, and then something happened, the election happened, that got pushed aside. Unfortunately, it got shelved. And so these guys have come into office, and we've asked him about this. Mr. Collins, Secretary Collins, knew nothing about it because it was a prior administration. However, sometimes you get lucky. And the lady next to me, Jen Birch, she was working on Capitol Hill on the House VA committee, the Veteran Affairs Committee staff for the House. She knew about this and she verified it to the VA secretary. So he agreed to take a look at this. What we're trying to do is to get the VA to develop a training and education package to reduce some of the anti-Semitism that does exist in parts of our federal government. We're starting with the VA, then we'll maybe go a little bit further, but we have to go one step at a time. That's something that is pending. My replacement is a Jewish war veteran from Texas, so he's working that now, and I'm still advising him on that. But yeah, there were some horrible things put on social media right after 7 October. And it was a VA attorney, an educated individual. And yes, it was off duty. I think she was using a personal computer, but when something gets out there in social media, it's out there pretty much forever. It was pretty horrible. Some people have seen it. It came to our attention. It came to the attention of some members of Congress. And so we're working that. And so that's the situation on that. Okay. This is talking about the White House. This is in the East Room of the White House last year, right after we had breakfast on Veterans Day, 11 November. I was the only one invited from the Jewish War veterans. Some of the other veterans groups are larger. They had a few more invites, but there's a bunch of VSO, what they call Veteran Service Organization leaders. And the guy in the front there is the prior VA Secretary, Dennis McDonough. Like I say, he's gone because of the change in administration. But he was developing this training and education package. So as I say, he was horrified with the events of 7 October. He sent us a letter expressing the VA concern about the initial attack that occurred. But like I say, we're dealing with a different climate now in Washington. We're not a partisan organization. We don't endorse candidates, so I don't want to get too deep into the partisan quicksand, but I can say that yes, the climate has changed in Washington. And that's, his name is Dennis McDonough, the prior VA secretary. Let's see, okay. This is the picture of me with President Biden. I came into the Army back in the mid-1970s. And I never could have imagined that at some point, 34 years later, I'd be standing with the President of the United States. Obviously, this was last year on 11 October. This is a little room adjacent to the East Room. When you see these ceremonies and events in the White House, if it's not the Oval Office, it's usually the East Room. And the East Room can hold about 200 people. And that's where we had breakfast. And okay, so let's go to the next page, or wait a minute, let's see. Is that the end of that? Maybe, okay, now maybe we're gonna go to the next group of slides. Let's see what happened. Okay, well, what do we do? Go down?
I don't know. Which one do you want? Do you want, what's this?
Yeah, let's try that. Okay, that's a picture. Those are some pictures of me way back when at Fort Knox, Kentucky. Technology wasn't that great. Okay, let's go to,
Something else?
yeah, we'll go to, let's see. Okay,
Cool.
we're working this. Okay,
There's these.
yeah, let's go to that one. Let's see. Okay, yeah, this is a good slide here.
Here you can go.
Yeah, no, okay, we'll go, yeah, right there, right there. Okay, back in April, this is around the time of Israeli, Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israeli Independence Day. Myself and Larry, some of you may know Larry Shulman, the older gentleman in that picture. He's a member of Temple Bethel, but regardless, Larry and I got a phone call from the Federation. And they told us what was going on. So we go over to the Farish building and we had a chance to meet with 2 IDF soldiers. That's the people, the individual on the far right and the far left. The gentleman on the right is Yoni, or Jonathan. He's a tanker in the Armor Corps, and had a nice chat with him. The young lady on the left, now this is interesting. Maybe my vision was screwed up. I had cataract surgery in September, so my distance vision has improved. And when I first saw her in April, I thought, wait a minute, what is this? She looks like a teenager in high school. She looked pretty young. Of course, some of these people, some of these college students are looking younger. Maybe I'm getting older, I'm not sure. But anyhow, I started talking to this young lady. She's a captain in the IDF. And based on what she was describing, she was clearly in her mid upper 20s. Like I say, I thought initially she was a teenager, but in any event, we had a great conversation for 45 minutes or an hour, took some pictures. And I do want to comment a little bit about this. The United States and Israel both have very competent, very professional militaries. However, there are some differences. Some of you, I look around the room, some of you are old enough to remember, about 50 years ago, Congress and President Nixon, they did away with the draft. Okay, so we don't have the draft now in the United States, people volunteer. Israel does have mandatory service for most of its young people. And I'm told that Israel is one of three democratic or free societies that has mandatory military service. Israel, South Korea, and I think the other one is Singapore. The other thing I'll mention, and one of the differences between the United States Armed Forces and Israel, okay? In the United States, we've gradually, I think, made some progress. We're at the point now where 17–18% of the US military is women. It's traditionally a male profession. And in the Air Force, it's probably a higher percentage. Marine Corps is a little bit lower, but on the average, 17–18% of the United States Armed Forces are women. And trying to think, in the IDF, I know some of you, I've been in Israel 3 times, some of you I know have been to Israel. We care about Israel, and I'm just curious, if anyone has any idea what the percentage of women happens to be in the IDF, does anybody want to venture a guess? What's that?
I was gonna say half, he says more than half.
Well, the number that I've heard is, anybody else want to venture a guess?
40.
Yeah, actually, it's around 41 or 42%. The United States, the 17–18% is actually very similar also with Canada and the NATO countries in Western Europe. The IDF is about 41–42% women. And what that means, of course, is that in some parts of the IDF, it is more, and then in other parts of the IDF, it's gonna be a little bit less. So, so that's the situation on that. Let's see. Okay, am I going backwards? Maybe.
Yeah.
All right, let's. Okay. Okay, there's another
set of slides.
set of slides that,
All we can do is go, let's, so what
Okay.
happens if you go to the last one here?
yeah,
That's it.
okay,
We've seen it, right?
yeah,
Yeah, that's what we have here in this
okay,
file. Do
Maybe
you wanna
that-
go to your thumb drive? This is thumb drive, this is your, thumb drive E, that's all we have in it.
okay. Maybe we did get all of them.
Yeah.
I think so.
red one.
Yeah, what's,
The red one we already did, it's the one for the old pictures from,
yeah, okay,
so, yep.
okay. I guess maybe that is all the slides. Okay, a couple more, yeah, question?
Sure.
Actually, I think that might be a Sheridan. Okay, yeah, comment about that. That was at Fort Knox, Kentucky, many years ago. The Armor School has now been moved to Fort Benning, Georgia. And I think the Pat Museum is still at Fort Knox. I think the Gold Reserve is still at Fort Knox, although I didn't get to visit the Gold Reserve. So that's the situation on that. Couple of things I want to talk about, and I'm not sure how much time we have, but I certainly.
Plenty of time, and we
Plenty
can
of
open
time.
it for questions.
And then we'll have
afterwards.
questions. One thing I do want to talk about a little bit, maybe we'll go to get off this slide or back out of this, but, okay, I have been asked the question, because I did serve over 30 years in the United States Army. I know we have some veterans in the room here, and they may have different views. There's no single right answer, but I did serve a while. And I have been asked the question occasionally, okay, did I experience anti-Semitism? Did I experience hatred? And it's kind of a Jewish answer, yes and no. Yeah, you know, what can I say? A Jewish answer. No, I was never targeted or harassed. I was never subject of any violence or anything of that nature. Okay, that did not happen. The Army and the other services are largely a merit-based system. And once people see that you can do your job or make a reasonable effort and you become a decent team member, for the most part, people don't really care, you know, if you're Muslim, Christian, or Jewish. Okay, by and large, that's the way it is. However, when I think back further, there was a situation, it might have been one of my first assignments overseas many years ago. And I was fairly new in the Army at the time, and I'd already figured out that there was, I'm not sure if it's a custom or tradition, amongst Jewish military personnel. We often will volunteer if possible. It's not always possible, but if possible, we'll volunteer for staff duty on 25 December. Okay? And obviously, it's a federal holiday. It's an important day for most of the country that happens to be Christian. And this was, I think, overseas in Germany or something, this before the wall came down. And so anyhow, I show up at this place. And this was a long time ago. How long ago? Some of you, when I look around the room, some of us are old enough to remember when somebody in an office that had a printable typewriter, that was a big deal, right? This is a few years ago, before we had computers and Word documents and everything, and mobile devices. Okay, so I show up at this unit. After a day or two, I decide, here it is, late October, it's early November, and I'm gonna volunteer for staff duty on 25 December. The Army, of course, you have to understand, there's some places, a hotel, a hospital, there's some places that never close down completely. They might have reduced staffing on some nights, weekends, and holidays, but they don't close down. Military doesn't close down completely. So I decide I'm gonna go volunteer for duty on 25 December. And there's an admin guy, company clerk. He looked at me and he started shaking his head. I said, well, I'm coming in here ahead of time. I'm not coming at the last minute. And he said something about, well, we've got this roster made up through December. And again, this was before we had these Word documents that you could easily edit, right? So he basically is saying, I don't think it's gonna happen. I says, well, who's really in charge of this thing? He said, the first sergeant. First sergeant is the senior enlisted advisor in this company or unit. So the next day I go in to see the first sergeant, and he was older than me, a big guy, been in the Army many years. And and I told him what I wanted to do. I didn't tell him why, but I just told him what I wanted to do. I'd like to volunteer for staff duty on 25 December. And I found out later there'd been a scandal in the unit some months before, people buying and selling duty. Money was being exchanged, people abusing ranking position, and some people got into trouble. So he right away starts barking at me. Did you take money? How much money did you take? I said, wait a minute, I'm brand new here, I hardly know anybody, and I didn't take any money. I didn't take any money from anybody. And he realized I was a new guy in the unit, so he kind of believed me that I didn't take any money when I explained to him that I didn't take any money. So then he's looking at me, he's staring at me. And this is going on for several seconds, and I'm really not feeling very comfortable. So then he starts barking at me, something to the effect, why the blankety blank would you volunteer for staff duty on 25 December if you didn't take any money? So now I'm trying to think very quickly something to say, and when in doubt, what do? You tell the truth. So I very quickly and very politely said, well, there's some people that don't celebrate Christmas. There's Muslim people, there's Jewish people, and I rattled off a few different religions. And he's not getting it. He's not getting it. He's not getting it at all. And basically, and then there was some lieutenant, she was walking by, the door of the office was open. She wasn't gonna interrupt this conversation, but I turned and our eyes met and she kind of smiled and kept on walking. And so basically he threw me out of his office and I thought, well, at least I tried. I tried to do the right thing. And then what happened was, about a day later, my boss calls me over and he says, you gotta go see the company commander tomorrow at 2 p.m. Now, you remember years ago, some of you were in school, if you had to go see the principal,
Yeah.
it meant you were in trouble, okay? And I guess in the Army, maybe back in the day, if you had to go see the commanding officer, perhaps it also meant you were in trouble. So some of the people kind of got the word that Ginsburg's got to go see the commander. So people started asking, what did you do? Did you screw up? What did you do? And I'm thinking real hard. I says, I really didn't do anything. I didn't even have a parking ticket. I didn't have a car at the time. So anyhow, I go see the commander the next day, whatever it was. And right away, I go in there as captain or major. And he looks at me, tells me, sit down, relax, so that seemed pretty good. And he had some papers on his desk, and he was shuffling papers. And he kept repeating my name, my last name, very quietly. He said, Ginsburg, Ginsburg, you're the new guy. Yes, sir, I'm the new guy here. Says, you want to volunteer for duty on 25 December. Says, that's correct. He says, okay, your request is approved, and we're gonna give you 4-day pass for New Year's, which really wasn't necessary, but anyhow, he had some understanding that Jewish people obviously don't celebrate Christmas, and we try to be good neighbors and good team members. And I never had a problem with that first sergeant. He rotated out 6 months later, but I later found out, see, this is really the lesson learned, because there's always a story behind the story. The first sergeant was a good soldier, however, a white boy from the backwoods of Kentucky or Tennessee probably had just about zero experience interacting with Jewish people. And, or Muslim, or perhaps anybody else that did not celebrate Christmas. So there is a difference, you see, between hatred and ignorance. And in that case, I think he was just simply lost in the fog. And, I think he realized I didn't take any money, but he had no clue. He had no clue about some people don't do Christmas. But so that's one story I share, because sometimes we get a little confused. You have to understand, sometimes people don't necessarily have the same knowledge or understanding that we have. Okay, not that I'm an expert on all these things, but, so that's one thing I remember. But the military, by and large, is a merit-based organization, and there's enormous opportunities for young people coming out of high school, coming out of college. Yes, to include Jewish men and women. And they've always served in the United States Armed Forces. You could do a Google search and you could pull up the names of many Jewish American veterans. And, that's interesting, but you have to understand at a very personal level, the people are there. They just may not be conspicuous because they tend to be scattered in small numbers. But Jewish people are there. Right now, I believe there's a total of 18 Jewish Medal of Honor recipients. Jack Jacobs being the one living Jewish Medal of Honor recipient. There's a guy who earned the Medal of Honor in the Civil War, Eugene Jacobson. There's some research being done. There's some information or evidence that he might be Jewish. I don't know. You're going back, 1860s, and records are maybe partially up, down, or whatever. So, but as I say, for me, I'm proud of what I did. It was a good career. Got to travel quite a bit around the world. And coming out of high school, my sister, my parents, we made our first visit to Israel, and that was in the late 1960s. And so that's when I first got my passport, and I kept it current ever since, and I'm glad I did. Been back to Israel 2 more times, hope to get back at some point, I don't know when, but that's the situation. One other thing I do want to talk about, it may be a little bit off topic, but because we care about Israel, I'm going to take liberty and mention it. And it concerns, I've been in conversations, and sometimes there's just a lot of bias and misinformation about Israel, and particularly the IDF in the last 2 years, what's been going on in Gaza. And I will say that there's a professor at West Point. You can Google the name if you want to get more information. A guy named John Spencer. He's not Jewish, but he's a retired Army colonel, considered the foremost scholar on urban warfare, which is basically what was happening in Gaza for the last 2 years. And hopefully the ceasefire does hold. It's fragile. It's really more of a ceasefire than a peace agreement. But nonetheless, I've seen all this misinformation and criticism of the IDF, and it bothers me because I know it's not true, but then Colonel Spencer was doing research. He's looked at urban warfare going back 100 years. And he found that, and this is all over the world, and he found that on the average, 8 or 9 non-combatants might be killed for every military person or fighter. So then he took a look at IDF in Gaza in the last 2 years. I don't know if anybody has any idea of what he found, but what he found was And this is despite the presence of hostages. Israel was trying to maneuver and not harm any hostages when they were there, still alive. And also with Gaza violating rules of warfare, using protected spaces, school, hospital, and mosque for military operations. Despite all of that, he found that Israel, maybe there might have been 1 or 1.5 non-combatant casualties for every Hamas fighter. And I say non-combatant because a lot of the civilians in Gaza really didn't have clean hands, okay? So that's the situation about that. But yes, the United States military has a very competent professional military, and just as Israel does. And trying to think how we're doing on time. Okay, I guess we're okay on time. But as I say, we're still working on some issues. There was actually a couple more slides. I have to see if I can find them. Maybe I'll describe this one slide. It's in here someplace. Let's see. You mentioned me being at the White House. Yes, I was at the White House 11 November last year for Veterans Day. The Jewish war veterans also, we keep 1 foot in the Jewish community. So on 16 December, and there's a picture here, maybe I can find it, but on 16 December, myself and Ken Greenberg, we were invited to the White House Hanukkah reception. And I've got a picture here someplace of some of the Jewish cadets from the Air Force Academy. They were singing Hanukkah songs and whatnot. What's interesting about that is in the background, there were Christmas decorations. Okay, it's 16 December at the White House. And then in addition, when I look further at that picture was actually in the east wing of the White House. So that whole area now is a pile of rubble. Okay, unfortunately, not sure if I can find that picture, but so that's what's going on. But as I say, there's we know that the Jewish people are about 2% of the United States. We know that about 6% of American people are veterans. And sometimes I'll get asked a question, okay, what percentage of the Jewish community around here are veterans? And nobody really has a good answer. It might be 1 or 2%, it might be more. Whatever number you have, it's probably undercounted because there's also a reserve component. And particularly around some of the large cities, you have a good number of Jewish men and women serving in the Guard and Reserve. There's some other things going on now. Again, not to get into the politics too much, but you should be aware. There was religious accommodations. You saw some of the rabbis wearing beards, or the facial hair, whatever you call it. And there is religious accommodation for military personnel wearing beards in the United States. And there's some Orthodox rabbis that they do that based on some things, I think, in 2 books of the Torah, in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. But what's happened now with the current Secretary of Defense, they put out a policy memo, and they're basically saying now, we don't want anybody wearing beards to include religious accommodation, and if we allow an exception, there'll be a non-deployable status, which is essentially, it adversely affects their careers. So that's something I think is going to be challenged in court. We're looking also to reach out to some of our congressional representatives. The problem, of course, here is that we have Senator Schumer and Senator Gillibrand. They're both in the minority party. And Joe Morelli is also in the minority party. So we're working to maybe have them reach out to the leadership on the other side, because that's how things get done. But we think that is, there's some real issues with that. The argument the other way was it could screw up or compromise somebody wearing a protective mask in a chemical environment. But the new masks today allow a proper seal as long as the beard is neatly trimmed. So, but those are things we're working on. There was something that happened recently at the Merchant Marine Academy. It didn't really get into the news, but there was a painting or a picture of Jesus, and it's apparently put on display in a command conference room. We don't think it should be there. It sort of implies religious endorsement by the government. So we're asking that be put in a museum or something. And And there's always little things like that that seem to pop up from time to time. So, but as I say, it is possible to serve in the United States military and still be Jewish. And I know there's a few Jewish veterans in the room. I'm not the only one here. I recognize a few faces and maybe some that I don't know that are veterans. In fact, let me see, just a quick show of hands, who's a veteran? Bob, Herb, yeah, there's a few veterans in the room, okay? Okay, okay, so, but again, I think the opportunity to speak and I'll take questions, comments, try to answer your questions best I can. Yeah, did you have a question, Dave? Yeah, Dave, go ahead.
But one simple one and one not so simple. Is Israel the only country with mandatory military service for women?
Okay, that I actually don't know. Let me think. South Korea, I think there are women that serve in the South Korean army. The men have mandatory service. I have to check. I don't know if the women do. Singapore is the other country and I don't know that, I'm not sure about that. I have to check. But I'm told that those are the only three countries in the world that have mandatory. North Korea, or South Korea rather, is in a dangerous neighborhood, absolutely North Korea. That's why they got dragged. And Israel still lives in a dangerous neighborhood, notwithstanding the peace with, Jordan and Egypt. But I'd have to check on that. I don't know.
The other question doesn't
Yeah.
relate to Judaism,
Right.
but your experience in the military. I wonder if there's discussion in the military if if there was a command from the president that went against the Constitution.
Well, okay, that's not really hypothetical.
I didn't say it was hypothetical, I said it wasn't Jewish.
Well, all right, let me try to comment on that, and this is just Gary's personal opinion. I'm not speaking for any organization, and I don't,
In your observation.
yeah, just my own personal opinion. When you talk about legal and constitutional, I'm not an attorney, but I will say this. Military, we're required to obey orders, but they're supposed to be lawful orders, okay? Lawful orders from the chain of command. And I'll make reference to something that's going on right now. It's not a Jewish specific situation, but it is something going on. You've heard about the last 2 months, they look like drone strikes from the video I've seen, taking out these little boats in the Caribbean and I guess now the Pacific. There's a serious question amongst some military people and particularly the veterans community, they have more flexibility to speak. Is this really legal? Even if there are illegal drugs on those boats, even if those boats are bound for the United States, which they may or may not be, okay, is that really legal? And I'm not sure that it is. And it appears to be drone strikes. It appears that US military personnel are serving as the drone operators. I'll give you one more data point. On 30 September, when the Secretary of Defense, I say Secretary of Defense because Congress didn't change the name to war, but when the Secretary of Defense and the President spoke at Quantico to the senior military leadership, generals, admirals, and senior enlisted advisors, the Secretary of Defense talked about the rules of engagement are out the window. That's a very, very troubling statement. You see, I don't know that there's been any legal review on striking these boats. Early in his second term, the current president fired or removed the 3 senior military attorneys for the Army, Navy, and Air Force. Now, there's military attorneys at subordinate levels of command, but if they've done any legal review, the administration is not talking about it. So there's a serious question whether those strikes are legal. It's not what we were doing before. What was done before, the US Navy and the US Coast Guard would stop those boats and search them. If the boats didn't stop, there's ways you can, shoot out the engine, but you don't blow up the whole boat. And then you start interrogating, interviewing these people, and you try to find out the higher ups, because we're taking out some very small fish in the pond. So that's a controversy going on right now. A 4-star admiral, Southcom just retired or resigned, so he probably has some serious misgivings about it. He's not saying too much publicly, but the fact that he just decided to retire, there's a message there.
Gary, he spoke out against it.
Yeah, okay,
That's why he retired.
yeah, okay.
We- If you're in the military, you are held by the Uniform Code of Conduct. You are required to obey the Uniform Code of Conduct, which means you cannot do anything illegal. And if you're involved in something illegal, you have a right to deny your superior officers orders to do that, and even take them into custody.
Right, yeah, your military personnel are required to obey lawful orders.
It is very strict, the Uniform Code of
Right.
Conduct.
The other thing about this, and I've spoken to some military, I'm not an attorney, but I've spoken to some military attorneys, or retired military attorneys on this very subject. They touched on quite a discussion, but that's okay. Because it's going on right now. When you talk about war crimes, and when you talk about trying to prevent war crimes, okay? It's not so much the outcome, it's the planning cycle. And right now, there's some serious questions as to, the planning cycle, what's really going on here? It doesn't appear to be anything about drugs or Venezuela, there's something else going on here, and it's very troubling. And like I say, it looks like there's drone strikes on these ships, and it appears to be US military personnel. The admiral that just retired was what they call the Geographic Combatant Commander, that's the Southern Command. It oversees US military interest in Central and South America. I suspect it's probably a functional command that was involved with this, that would be SOCOM, Special Operations Command, because they can keep things in a much tighter circle. But, I mean, what most of the veterans and military people want to see is they want Congress to step up under Article 1 and exercise oversight and adult supervision. And for the most part, it's not happening. I think Senator Paul was maybe one of the few people in the majority party that was criticizing or questioning this. And, okay, there was another question back here.
Yeah, the other example is the president forcing the military into a police role inside cities in the US.
You talk about the immigration enforcement? Yeah, there's some, again, these are personal opinions from me. There's some serious issues there. And immigration is a very sensitive subject for our community, because there's only one group of Jewish refugees that were allowed into this country during the Holocaust or Shoah. And they were in Oswego, New York, 600-700 people. But getting back to what you're talking about, I know ICE gets a lot of criticism, and I'm not here to defend ICE. A lot of the very aggressive tactics are being used by the Border Patrol. Now, the Border Patrol is supposed to operate within 100 miles of the Mexican-Canadian border. I don't think Chicago was within 100 miles of the Mexican or Canadian borders. So, and a lot of those tactics are, I think, the Border Patrol, and they have a little more freedom around the border to do things. But, for example, what happened in Chicago a few weeks ago, if you have one or two bad people in a building, you get a search warrant, an arrest warrant, and you laser focus on one or two people. Why we would terrorize an entire apartment building, kicking down doors at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, I don't know. So I have some concerns about that.
Why would you tear gas children?
What's that?
Why would you tear gas?
Well,
Gary, that has nothing to do with the military. If we're talking about the military, what's happening with the military is he's dispatching them to guard buildings,
right.
which is legal.
Well,
He's also dispatching them to walk through the streets and do police work, which is not what the military does.
Right.
So if you're gonna stay with the military, stick to what the military does. And as a soldier, I would have had a problem with acting as a police force. And that's the big problem, not standing in front of a building.
Yeah, what happened in Washington DC several weeks ago, I don't know, the crime is going down or whatever. I mean, a lot of the people, what I saw in the news was they were standing around tourist sites and picking up litter and things of this nature. That's not really.
The governor of New York did the same thing in New York City, in the suburbs, 2 years ago. So the whole question is, can you use the military as a police force? That's what the question is. And as an ex-member of the military, and you're as an ex-member of the military, I was never given an order
Right.
to carry a weapon into a city
Well,
to use
there's,
against
there's
Americans.
only very limited circumstances under which that would be lawful, and it doesn't appear that those conditions exist. And that's why the courts, the federal courts, are challenging some of these decisions by the administration. And as I say, the admiral that just retired, you know, he did not serve 4 years as a 4-star admiral. So he's probably retiring as a 3-star admiral, which is still a very successful career. But he made a statement by retiring or choosing to walk away early, and he clearly disagreed with drone strikes. These appear to be totally, there's a question, they're not proper under international law.
One other thing.
Yeah,
If
you want to
everybody
give
needs
Dave the
to-
microphone? Or Dave, yeah, you should use the mic. Got it.
There's another thing to understand. You have the Army, you have the National Guard, and you have the Army Reserves. The Army and the Army Reserves are under federal control. The National Guard is under state control. So when the governor releases the National Guard and state, remember that? Okay, that's the governor of a state releasing the National Guard to do certain types of things. The President of the United States supposedly doesn't have that right. President of the United States controls the Army and the Reserves. So when you see him releasing the National Guard, the question becomes one, as a soldier, is do I have to serve under those orders? And that's the debate that's going on. So don't mix them up, because as I said before, the governor of New York sent the New York National Guard into the subway system of New York City with arms, okay, with guns. The same thing happened a number of years ago. I remember when we lived, when we had some terrorist attack after 9/11, they dispatched the National Guard throughout New York City area. I mean, we had National Guardsmen with armed weapons standing on ferries and on trains.
They were
for
guarding
special-
bridges and. Yeah.
Right,
Right.
okay, no, they were also standing at our ferry station
Right.
in Port Jefferson.
Right.
They were also on public trains for public transportation, but that was all done by the governor. So you can't blame everything on the president, and you can't blame everything on the governors. The problem that they're having now is who has the right to do what? And it's very tough on anybody I know who's still in the military about whether or not do I perform and do that order. Because under the Uniform Code of Conduct, you are not allowed to do anything illegal. And bearing arms against US citizens is illegal. So that's the big question now, and that's what's going on in the courts.
Yeah, and I didn't catch your whole conversation, but under Article 10 of the Constitution, you know, states have a lot of rights, and for a president to bypass the governor, that should only be done in very extraordinary situations. It was done to enforce the civil rights laws back in the 1950s or 60s, when one of the governors didn't want to enforce the Supreme Court's order on integration. That was probably seen as historically a proper example of the president overriding a governor to integrate a school in Little Rock or Alabama or someplace. It's a very limited situation, though, where a president can or should override a governor. And when you talk about invasion, that's supposed to be a foreign military or government, not a few people, maybe some of whom may have legitimate asylum claims. And so, you know, these are difficult questions. And but as I say, in the military, we obey orders, and the orders are supposed to be lawful. And challenging and questioning an order that you don't think is lawful can be a little tricky and complicated.
And career ending.
And it could be career ending. Like I say, this admiral just retired, and whether you agree or disagree with the guy, he was standing on principle. And I have to respect that. At least he had, whatever nerve or courage to do what he felt was right and not to be a part of something that he felt was wrong. And again, that's even if there are drugs on those boats, and even if the boats are bound for the US, is that really the proper remedy? Is that really the proper course of action? And so these are difficult questions, but ideally, in our system, what's supposed to happen is Congress is supposed to provide the check and balance. The federal courts are doing a little bit, but that can take time for things to cycle through the courts. And of course, decisions get appealed sometimes if somebody doesn't agree with that. Yeah, be a quick. David, where's the mic? Oh, you got a mic, okay.
If a judge says that a member of the administration is in contempt of court, if they're not following the Constitution, who enforces that? Maybe that's a rhetorical question.
Well, with this administration, that becomes very difficult, I guess, doesn't it? It becomes very difficult. And like I say, what's supposed to happen, and I'm not a lawyer, but I have a pretty good knowledge of what's in the 7 articles and 27 amendments to the United States Constitution. I generally know what's in there. And Congress, is in Article 1, and they're supposed to step up. And sometimes I think is the president trying to repeal Articles 1 and 3. I mean, it's okay. Congress is supposed to step up, and really the majority party, that's the way our system works. The majority party is supposed to exercise oversight. I'm not sure if it was Senate, it might have been some members of the House. Got a classified briefing on these drone strikes taking out the ships in the Caribbean last week. I don't know exactly what was discussed, but one of the persons came on the news and said something to the effect that they got very little information. And here this has been going on for 2 months and we're still not getting much information. So that's a concern. It really is. Israel's in a whole different situation. They're in a very rough neighborhood. At one point dealing with threats from 7 different directions, which I'm not sure if I've ever seen that quite before in modern history. The United States, we saw a little bit of that on 9/11. Israel deals with a potential 9/11 every day. But as I say, we need Congress to step up under Article 1. So.
This will be the last comment because I'm mindful of time. So Fred, yeah.
Speak up.
This,
In the last,
you need the
last
last
2 months, we've seen a lot of efforts to get rid of what they call DEI. The recognition of any minority group and any effort to help them or make them visible. And there have been things that have been said in public by the Secretary of Defense that suggest that any information about achievements by members of minority groups should not be given any special support. And in short, I'm asking whether this has made life more difficult for serving members, Jewish serving members of the military.
yeah, the short answer is yes. 2 quick comments. You remember about 6 months ago, and this was in the news because of the prominence of Jackie Robinson, the baseball player. Some material was taken down off, I think, the Pentagon website. And there was a lot of pushback, and I think they reversed course on that. Okay, now what many people may not know is that about the same time, there was a bunch of pictures of Jewish graduates at the US Naval Academy that got taken down at the Naval Academy. And this was around the 1st of April, not an April Fool's joke. It was around the time the Secretary of Defense was speaking to the midshipmen. And so the pictures at the Levy Center, which is the Naval Academy equivalent of the Jewish chapel, some pictures got taken down. And one of our members, a retired 2-star admiral, Jewish fellow, Paul Becker, lives in the area. We had Paul go over and check it out. He went and saw the superintendent, the 3-star admiral, and who happened to be a woman, not that it matters, and she swore up and down that she didn't direct that, and they found out that some other Navy Captain 06 told the rabbi to take down these pictures, and she felt intimidated. She took down the pictures. The pictures have largely been put back up. We don't know, and they were really targeting pictures of Jewish women. graduates. Some of them went into Navy, some of them went into the Marine Corps. A very bizarre situation. We don't know what was behind that. Was the Secretary of Defense's visit to Annapolis behind that? We may never know the whole story. I think the superintendent, the vice admiral, I think she was telling the truth to Paul Becker that she didn't order that. Somebody did and intimidated and outranked this, the rabbi there at the Naval Academy. And like I say, that situation, I think, has largely been corrected. But I'm not really sure if it was just a misunderstanding or something else was going on. But the short answer is yes, it is an issue. When we talked to the secretary, the VA secretary, and he came from the Georgia congressional delegation, big supporter of the current president. That's how he got the job as a VA secretary. When we talked to him about education and training to reduce and mitigate anti-Semitism in his agency, the second largest federal agency, we were very careful to talk about education, and basically, we don't think that's under the traditional DEI umbrella. Now, there's some people in the ADL that will tell you this administration, if they don't like something, they label it DEI. We don't think education and training to prevent hatred, whether it's against Jewish people, blacks, or whoever, Muslim people, I don't think that that's DEI. So it's a complicated situation, but I know, for example, okay, I'll give you another example, Fred. Last year in May, some of you may be aware, 31 days in May, and I think President Bush declared by executive order, it's Jewish American Heritage Month. Some of you, it's not really, I don't know if it's, I think the Federation's aware of this, but last year, I attended a VA ceremony at the Library of Congress in honor of Jewish American Heritage Month. They didn't do it this year, different administration, different VA secretary, okay? I mean, there's definitely a change in climate in Washington. Absolutely, but to celebrate and recognize the heritage and background of people, whether they be Black Americans, Jewish Americans, I don't look at that as DEI. I mean, it's a tricky situation, and in this administration, I mean, they seem to have a certain idea, a certain worldview. And I mean, so that's the situation.
Well, seeing that that's a situation, we're gonna have to leave it at that, because that's a situation. And I'm gonna thank you from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your service. Veterans, and sometimes you wouldn't know, right? So it's thank you, all of you. And thank you so much for your conversation, to your nuance, to your experience. We're very blessed to have you here with us. And well, I can't wait to go back to the East Wing because it doesn't exist, but wherever it is that you're invited, I'm sure that you'll represent us well. So thank you so much for this talk. We're really very lucky to have all these amazing people in our congregation. We definitely one of them. And we'll see you guys next week. I think there's a very exciting social, there's an adult ed program at 11, right? With Nancy Krause. Right, Nancy Krause will be doing some as an artistic hands-on project on images from Genesis. So you should stay because it's going to be an amazing way to spend your time all the way until noon. Don't go anywhere. So have a great remaining of your day here at Bethel Cider. Thank you.
Rabbi, may I say something about the gallery hall cards that are on sale? I have a board.
So there's an announcement from Shelley, so everyone
Yeah.
can just take a look. Here's Nancy. Just a minute, Nancy.
As you go out, please notice that, we have, the gallery hall committee has created a series of cards for sale. They're for fundraisers, so we can buy more art, repair more art. And, so I have a board showing all the different cards we've done, and you may order them. I'll take your orders, and then they'll come in a week or two. Monica has multiple cards, so we no longer have cards. God bless Monica always.
And the announcement from Nancy Crowd for the next activity at 11 a.m. It's gonna be on the other side of this wall. Okay? Nancy waves, everybody sees who you are, this is Nancy, if you don't know her. And her activity, is happening at the other side of this wall, so don't forget to go there at 11 a.m.
I wanted to have this picture because there's a lot of Jews. My friend, her daughter is serving in the
army.
army, yes. I
She's there.
showed her a picture this morning.
Well, you have to talk to Gary, it's his pictures.
Huh?
It's Gary's picture.
Yeah,
He can send it to you.
this is a picture. It was discussed. My daughter.
Have to